The ring of a buzzing phone in the stillness of Flagstaff might alter everything instantly. And for Kody Brown, it did just that. One message flashed on his screen, a one he wasn't prepared for, and sources tell us it had numbers large enough to leave even him speechless in mid-sentence. No neon lights screamed Backpay, but that's what it subtly suggested. A season 19 modification that might move money into hands he hadn't seen in years. At the same time, Meri Brown was light years away, serene, composed, and unruffled. When she finally heard of it, she didn't freak out. She didn't yell, she smiled. Subtly, simply, two words that spoke louder than any rant: balance due. But what Kody didn't know yet was that this wasn't all about numbers. It was about timing, precision, and a game that had been being played out for a long time by Meri. Could this little, seemingly innocent message be the beginning of the biggest upheaval in their world so far? The day had begun as any other in Flagstaff, the sunlight drifting lazily across the kitchen countertops, and a fresh coffee smell wafting through the air. Kody Brown, his normally perpetual center of attention, sat quietly scrolling on his phone, sipping coffee with a rigid sense of habit soon to be broken. That hum, a faint, nearly harmless noise, caused him to miss a beat. There had been a solitary message, one that insiders say contained numbers large enough to make him hit the brakes. It wasn't in capital letters, it wasn't underlined, it didn't shout, but to anyone who understood the understated politics of the family, the message was unmistakable. Backpay, adjustments, money due. And not any money, it was attached to season 19, to appearances long in the can, contracts signed in secret, and fine print few read. Kody gazed at the screen, eyes opening as the implications hit him. Over at the other end of town, Meri Brown was enjoying the morning in her typical tranquil manner. No ringing phone, no shock, no frantic pacing. Her own coffee, her own beat, and her own style of dealing with life. When news finally reached her of the same numbers, her response was barely detectable. A faint smile, a soft nod, and then the words that have become legendary. Balance due. No theatrics, no yelling, just confidence. And in that small exchange, the stage was set for what those close to it characterize as a muted but fierce battle for influence. A one marked not by loud voices, but by calculated numbers and strategic timing. Kody's response, on the other hand, was nearly dramatic. Pal close to him speaks in hushed tones about pacing, frantic calls, and the sort of stress one experiences when one is faced with information one didn't see coming. Sources indicate he was searching for clarity, trying to make sense of how this transition could impact not only money, but the sense of control. Control, after all, had always been at the center of what he did within the family, both in front of and behind the camera. Meri's quiet confidence, however, was almost unnerving to those around her. She had spent years keeping meticulous records, tracking appearances, saving receipts, and quietly noting who owed what and when. It wasn't about greed. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about preparation. And now, for the first time in a long while, the payoff for that preparation was in plain sight. The day passed slowly, with sunlight creeping across the countertops and the tacit beat of everyday life going on around them. But below the surface, tension simmered. Each ping of message, each phone call, and each passing look had a new burden. Family friends dropped broad hints of furtive meetings, covert conversations, and a sort of backstage maneuvering that most outsiders don't ever notice. The world appeared peaceful on its surface, but the underlying current of expectation seemed to vibrate in the air. But just as it looked like the morning would settle into the familiar, a fresh detail came along, one that would turn everything upside down. According to sources, this shift wasn't merely a matter of cash being reallocated. It was a quiet nod to divisions past, loyalties past, and decisions past that had long-term repercussions. Kody, with his efforts at keeping the family intact and having some sort of public perception, was suddenly confronted with the realization that the world wasn't as much in control as he thought it was. And Meri, cool and composed as always, appeared to realize that the time was hers, no matter if he knew it or not. During the day, there were small moments that hyped the tension. There was a call that broke up a meeting, an hour-long text message left unattended, and rumors among insiders that started to circulate. They spoke of careful planning, of years ago conversations now finally reaping their fruits, and of the quiet triumphs that very few people outside the inner circle could ever see. It was not dramatic in the classical sense. There were no fiery arguments, no shouting matches. The drama was subtle, nearly imperceptible, but every move had significance. Every look, every pause, and every well-spoken message was part of a wider story that insiders maintain can tip the power balance in ways nobody forecast. For Kody, the awareness was coming to him gradually. What he had always thought was routine, even mundane, suddenly had the power to upend everything he believed he was in charge of. And for Meri, every little detail had been covered, every potential plot twist foreseen, and every resolution quietly enjoyed beforehand. By late afternoon, their dynamic had gelled. Kody was moving at a frantic pace, attempting to corral the ripple effects of the Backpay notice, while Meri went about her day with studious calm. Sources indicate she had no urgency whatsoever, and she knew the power of timing and patience could be stronger than a confrontation. And in that contrast, insiders indicate, lies the heart of the tension, one individual acting out of surprise, the other making his way with quiet control. Friends of Meri paint the scene with a combination of awe and admiration. For years, she had concentrated on her own path, her own tasks, and her own idea of what was fair. Now the dividend of that steady approach was apparent to any observer. The small letter, the silent smile, and the words "balance due" bore the weight of preparation built up over many years, and in doing so transformed potential bedlam into a quiet triumph for one and a desperate rush for the other. And yet, as the sun set in Flagstaff, the real story was just getting underway. The tension that had been simmering in the background promised to develop in ways that would astonish even those closest to the situation. Could a quiet message, a cool response, and a carefully maintained record actually tip the balance of power? Or was that the tip of a much more complex and emotionally fraught series of events? Only time would tell. By the following morning, Flagstaff air felt thickened, as if the day before's tiny earthquake of a message had created invisible cracks in all the corners of the house. Kody Brown's step was nervous, even when he was attempting to calm down in front of the cameras. Friends who are close to him mutter that he hardly slept, dwelling on calculations, potential repercussions, and the stark reminder that even minute details could snowball into gargantuan consequences. Meanwhile, Meri's morning was quiet, almost serene. She moved through her routine with the same precision she always had. Coffee brewed just so, papers neatly stacked, her mind calm but alert. Insiders say that by now, she knew the exact numbers, the exact timeline, and perhaps even anticipated every reaction Kody might have. Her calm was not arrogance. It was preparation, patience, and quiet control. And that control, insiders report, was keeping Kody completely bonkers. The day started with veiled confrontations, hushed telephone conversations, and a constant barrage of texts. Kody, insiders report, attempted to cover up panic by business-sounding chats, but wore the mask reluctantly. One of his friends talked about him pacing close to the living room, cursing under his breath, while his other wife, Janelle, sat silently on the couch, observing it all with a combination of concern and resignation. No cameras were required to film the tension. It was palpable in the air, in the silence, in the glances exchanged between rooms. Meanwhile, Meri, out in the middle of nowhere, had started secretly mapping out her own timeline of events. Every contract, every appearance, every text and email that had ever flowed between her and Kody were all documented. Sources indicate that she had a long time ago figured that someday these little bits of data would weigh much more heavily than people anticipated. And that day, insiders say, may now be here. It's strange, sources say, how silence can be louder than words. Kody's frantic pacing spoke volumes. Meri's quiet confidence shouted from miles away, and everyone watching, whether close family or casual insiders, could feel the tension radiating. As the day wore on, Subtle but pointed conversations began cropping up in every corner. Partners of Christine close to her describe her as caught in the middle, unsure of whether to placate Kody, remain neutral, or privately watch the drama unfold. Her eyes, sources say, conveyed the sort of conflicted feelings arising from years of dealing with complicated family dynamics, loyalty, fear, curiosity, and maybe a small spark of hope that someone else might finally have gained an advantage in this web of complexity. By mid-afternoon, the tension escalated. One source described a scene where Kody received a call that confirmed Meri's meticulous record-keeping. His voice, usually composed, cracked slightly as he asked questions he already knew the answers to. Behind him, friends and family whispered quietly among themselves, their words careful, almost reverent, as though each phrase carried the potential to tip the balance of the day. And then came the instant that insiders' report stopped hearts. A small parcel arrived at the home of Kody. Not a present, not an innocent delivery, papers painstakingly put together, detailing the precise information of appearance, charges, and terms. As per sources, Kody tore open the package with a combination of shock and horror, gazing over page after page while the people around him breathed quietly. Could a neatly stacked pile of paper possibly induce such a state of panic? To all observers, the tension was almost tangible, the stakes intangible but enormous. Each line of script, each highlighted annotation seemed to whisper, the game has changed. At the same time, Meri, far from the physical mess, smiled silently while she saw the ripple effect creep through calls and messages. She had never made a show, never yelled, never commanded attention, and yet, her work was now unmistakably strong. Every step she had taken in the past, every meticulous note, every ordered file, every calculation was paying off. By the evening, the family dynamic had changed perceptibly. Kody, who was usually the conductor, now acted reactive, bordering on defensive. Insiders speak in hushed tones of even skepticism lacing the simplest exchanges, handing over a cup of coffee, light banter on routines of the day, driven by an undertone of tension. Every look, every pause, every unexpressed thought layered the drama, brewing a quiet tempest impossible to disregard. And just when it looked like the day could crawl to a close on tired silence, another surprise popped up. One that sources say even surprised Kody himself. A little note, almost slipped under the radar, suggested another depth layering of preparation that Meri had quietly orchestrated on her own, so minute that it seemed to swing the entire balance decisively in her direction. Friends who witnessed the unfolding events described the evening as electric. The family, though physically together, existed in separate emotional worlds. Kody's frantic energy clashed with Meri's serene precision, while other wives watched, weighed, and reacted in subtle but meaningful ways. One source noted that the quietest glance from Meri seemed to hold the most power, a reminder that not all victories are loud. As darkness fell in Flagstaff, the tale was far from finished. The tension, according to those in the know, would radiate through phone calls, texts, and encounters deep into the future. And yet the unmistakable story was unfolding. One side had spent years preparing in secret, while the other hurried along live trying to keep pace. Could Kody reclaim the reins? Or was this subtle transition already too late to undo? One thing was certain. Every individual who had been present now had the knowledge that the power dynamic had silently, irreversibly shifted. The next morning came in with a sort of otherworldly stillness over Flagstaff. Sunlight filtered languidly through windows, birds sang outside, and yet, within, there was no such tranquility. Kody Brown was up, pacing around, glancing repeatedly at his phone, as if in the hope that somehow, the numbers would rearrange themselves. Insiders rumor that by this time panic had started to creep into even his most tightly guarded demeanor. Each look, each phrase, even each silence seemed charged with tension. Meanwhile, Meri's day was unfolding like clockwork. Coffee in hand, she methodically reviewed her notes once again, not out of necessity, but out of a quiet ritual that had become second nature. Friends say her calmness wasn't just confidence. It was a shield, a way to let others flail, while she stayed grounded. And perhaps secretly, it was also a small thrill. There was power in preparation, and she had it in spades. But still the day was set to slide even further into chaos. Word got out, gradually at first, that Kody's efforts to corral the situation were doing more harm than good. Messages meant to calm turned desperate. Phone calls meant to clarify ended up raising more questions. Insiders claimed the vibe around him had changed from controlled leadership to reactive desperation. A very slight but unequivocal shift that everyone close to the family could sense. The drama wasn't confined to Kody and Meri, either. Christine is said to have observed the drama unfolding before her with a combination of worry and powerlessness. Her eyes, witnesses say, reflected the same thing many viewers might experience watching the mayhem from the outside: confusion, incredulity, and the distant hope that anyone might at long last gain the upper hand in a manner that could reinstate the equilibrium. By late morning, sources painted a pivotal moment. Kody had received a lengthy message from Meri. Not furious, not entitled, but accurate. Each line underscored what insiders had long intuited. She had seen this day coming. She had tallied every minute detail, and she had secretly positioned herself to move at just the right time. Friends close to Kody whispered that the message hit him like a cold wave, leaving him stunned, flustered, and searching for some semblance of control that was no longer fully his. It's strange, insiders say, how a calm voice can be louder than yelling. Kody's frantic energy filled rooms, but Meri's composed words carried weight that even he couldn't ignore. By afternoon, the dynamic had shifted yet again. Small standoffs started to materialize. Not loud, dramatic fights, but small, sharp sparring punctuated with emotion. One of the sources recounted an incident in which Kody attempted to talk over a soft explanation from Meri, and was greeted by unyielding, level eyes and a voice so composed it threatened to slice through the tension like a knife. Other wives looked on, and according to sources, their responses were a range of subtle nods to restrained amazement. Each telephone call, each hushed conversation, and every look between relatives now had several meanings. Friends liken it to balancing on a tightrope. One miscalculated step, one misplaced statement, and the thin equilibrium might completely disintegrate. But Meri was inaccessible, collected, serene, and well aware that the tempest was raging around her just as she had predicted. Then came the surprise. Insiders' report drove the stress to its height. A surprise piece of news emerged. A small contractual tidbit Kody had never noticed for years. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't announced, but to those who were observant, it was explosive. Friends who spoke with the family on condition of anonymity said it was like a quiet bomb had detonated, a slight adjustment that could result in a huge consequence. Kody's panic accelerated, and everyone observing could nearly witness the wheels spinning manically in his brain. By evening, the emotional stakes had escalated. Kody reportedly tried to regain composure, attempting casual conversations that felt forced, while Meri moved through her day as though nothing extraordinary were happening. The contrast between them, insiders say, was almost cinematic. One person in full-blown reactive mode, the other in controlled, deliberate rhythm. Every interaction between them now carried the weight of unspoken challenges and quiet victories. And just when the day felt untenable, another small, nearly imperceptible shift from Meri redistributed the tension yet again. A single deliberately timed text insinuated at a secret she had kept close to her chest for months, a detail that, if made public, could utterly destabilize the balance. Insiders say the rest of the evening was filled with whispered strategizing, cautious observations, and subtle power plays. Kody tried to anticipate Meri's next steps, but by now the pattern was clear. Every move she made had been meticulously planned, while he was forced into reactive chaos. Even the other wives began to sense the shift, some quietly siding with the calm authority of preparation, others unsure of where loyalty should fall. By evening, friends say the atmosphere in Flagstaff was charged with unspoken anxiety. The serene facade of the homes concealed a whirlwind of emotions, micro-triumphs and polite deceptions. Kody, weary but still resolute, confronted a challenge unlike any previous one. one that called not only for reaction but for strategy, perception, and maybe humility. Could Kody somehow find a way to get back on his feet, or was this meticulously planned change already too far along? And would anyone outside of this tranquil war zone even notice the size of what was transpiring? Answers were yet weeks off, but insiders claimed tension was now practically intolerable. The light in the morning in Flagstaff seemed practically deceptive. It all seemed normal from the outside: birds singing, sunlight streaming across the countertops, the lingering smell of coffee in the air. But insiders tell of the energy within the houses as almost electric, a tension so palpable it practically felt like it could be sliced by a knife. Kody Brown, according to sources, hardly slept the previous night, tormented by each calculation, each overlooked detail, and each potential backlash. His usual cool was beginning to unravel, with cracks visible to friends and family members, even from afar. Meanwhile, Meri started her day as it always began, with quiet precision. Coffee in front of her, papers in perfect order. She navigated the morning like a well-oiled machine. But this day, unlike a typical routine, held a heightened level of intensity. Friends who know her say she was hypersensitive to every look, every text message, every wave her being, or lack thereof, would generate. She wasn't just peaceful, she was intentional. Every step calculated to be in control, and that very deliberate placidity, sources say, was pushing Kody further and further over the edge with each tick of the clock. By mid-morning, minor skirmishes were starting to bubble up. Kody attempted to keep control by phone calls, text messages, and diplomatically spoken words, but each effort seemed to rebound. Sources mutter that his words, once commanding, now were panicky. Every explanation or assurance seemed to fall apart as soon as it was made. His friends who were close to him recalled observing the battle as nearly agonizing. A man accustomed to dictating the cadence of family life now scrambling frantically against someone who had prepared for each step. Meri, meanwhile, waltzed through her own day untouched by the drama. Sources claim that her poised confidence was not merely a function of preparation but of strategy. Every file carefully organized, every note carefully noted, every previous interaction remembered in detail, all part of a master plan that only Kody could start to glimpse. And then there was the moment that sources call the first true emotional crack. A letter came, one that, in itself, was small but weighed more than the words on the page. It was a gentle reminder, but one that could not be denied, that each choice, each promise, and each showing had repercussions that could not be overlooked. Kody, sources say, physically winced, his brain trying to prepare itself for what this seemingly small thing might set off. Friends describe it as seeing a tower of cards so carefully balanced that one tiny push would topple them. The other wives, sources hiss, were similarly impacted. Christine was said to feel torn between inserting herself to de-escalate tensions and just sitting there watching the drama unfold. Janelle, sources say, sat in silence, her expression a combination of concern and shock at the detailed game of power being played right under their noses. Every look, every slight movement, seemed weighted, as if unstated alliances were being formed and dissolved with every beat of the heart. By afternoon, Kody's desperation became almost palpable. He tried to regain control with carefully planned conversations, but even minor interruptions, a missed call, a new email, a delayed response, sent him into near panic. Meanwhile, Meri's quiet authority remained unshaken. The calm in the storm. Friends whisper that she seemed almost to savor the small, precise victories, as Kody scrambled to respond. It's odd, insiders maintain, the way smallest particulars can have the greatest import. A single message, a quietly submitted paper, a small look, all may tip power in ways that no one immediately perceives. And on this day, the import of those particulars was tipping ever more sharply toward Meri. By late afternoon, tensions had boiled over. A small miscommunication, something that in normal times might have been shrugged off, was a flashpoint. Sources tell a scene where Kody's frustration finally boiled over, his normally subdued voice rising ever so slightly, while Meri was altogether unruffled. Friends of the family close to them whisper that the contrast couldn't be more extreme. one person careening with reaction, the other grounded in quiet conviction. And just when it looked like the day would pass with boiling tension, came a fresh twist. Sources indicate a long-forgotten document appeared. Something minor, all but inconsequential on paper, but bursting with meaning. Pals characterized the moment as charged. Kody's face changed from anger to disbelief, while Meri, typically even-tempered, appeared to accept, almost inaudibly, that the dynamic had shifted all over again. Could Kody rebound from yet another shocking revelation? Or was this stealthy, calculated plan now beyond his grasp? The answer lingered as a storm cloud, dark and relentless, biding its time for the next step. Evening brought no relief. According to sources, every interaction became heightened. Passing coffee cups, casual conversations, even laughter felt layered with tension. Kody tried to mask his emotions, but insiders say that those closest to the family could see the cracks forming, the panic beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Meri's calm, precise movement suggested she had already anticipated the cascade of reactions, ready for whatever unfolded next. And just when things seemed to be held at a fever pitch, rumors of another bombshell started circulating, something so stealthily potent it promised to turn everything around overnight. People who are close friends with the family say the suspense is almost too much to bear. One small miscalculation, one ill-timed email, or one unfiltered response could totally flip the delicate power balance. By dusk, Flagstaff was heavy with tension. One individual had quietly planned in advance for years, each step calculated, each possibility weighed. Another left in a panic, responding in the moment to processes almost imperceptible yet impossible to escape. And all of us who watched, insiders assert, could sense that the narrative was far from complete. This was merely the start. The sun rose but barely broke the horizon above Flagstaff, but inside the Brown households was a charged atmosphere. Kody Brown walked with an agitated urgency, moving from room to room, phone clutched in hand, attempting to foretell the next ripple in a day that seemed to be careening out of his control. Insiders present him as tense, haunted nearly by every number, every message, every detail that had started to pile up like small but weighty stones upon his shoulders. Meri, meanwhile, held to her measured rhythm. Coffee in hand, she went over documents again, not out of compulsion, but to ensure the small triumphs already underway. Friends around her describe it as a quiet contentment, a subtle knowledge that all of the preparation, each of the notes so carefully maintained, and each of the observations so carefully made years ago, were now reaping rewards. She didn't have to scream, yell, or make a scene. Her silence was telling. And that silence, insiders say, was now making the tiniest details into the biggest wins. By late morning, subtle changes in family dynamics were starting to emerge. Kody's efforts to retrieve his composure were growing hopeless. His voice, once authoritative, now betrayed the edge of panic. A call made to simply clarify only heightened his anxiety. Texts sent to verify facts bounced back with more questions than resolution. Friends whisper that it was almost too painful to observe. A man accustomed to staging control now fully reactive to a person who had seen every move coming. At the same time, Meri went on with the day as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. According to insiders, her quiet, calculated composure was part of a long planned-out effort, one constructed over years of observing, analyzing, and storing away every conversation, every figure, and every detail that might someday prove important. Every little move was thought through, every hesitation rehearsed, every word weighed. It's strange, insiders say, how the quietest person can hold the most power. Kody's frantic energy filled the rooms, but Meri's controlled composure resonated far deeper. The afternoon was filled with subtle confrontations that, to anyone on the outside, would have appeared insignificant, but within the household held immense meaning. A raised eyebrow here, a silence there, an uncompleted sentence, all spoke volumes of changing dynamics. Christine's friends describe her as being torn between wanting to step in and quietly sitting back and watching history quietly unfold in real time, unsure whether to provide comfort, guidance, or mere observation. Then arrived the moment insiders characterize as the emotional turning point. Kody was sent a message, a quietly assembled document, filled with meticulous numbers and timelines. The response, sources report, was swift. Shock, anger, panic, all crossing his face in quick succession. Friends murmur it was a moment where the fulcrum of the day had visibly shifted. The scales were tipping and Kody could see it even if he couldn't yet bring himself to believe it. Mary's reaction, in contrast, remained quiet, almost imperceptible, yet insiders say it was loaded with significance. A slight nod, a measured sip of coffee, a glance toward the sunlit window, all small gestures that silently reinforced her control over the unfolding situation. It was a victory executed without drama, without shouting, without spectacle, but it was victory nonetheless. And just when the day appeared to have reached a climax beyond intensity, yet another quiet discovery erupted, a long-forgotten detail months earlier that might reshape the family dynamics of influence entirely. Kody allegedly froze upon the realization of what was happening. The night wore on, and the family dynamic had subtly but surely changed. Kody, erstwhile mastermind, now responded. Meri, who had been on the periphery of the day's frenzy, now glided with subdued authority. Even small interactions, a passing plate, an exchanged glance, were charged with tension and unspoken intent. Friends of the family speak in hushed tones of how it was practically like something out of the movies. A silent struggle for power unfolding before their very eyes, invisible to anyone not noticing, but impossible to ignore for those who did. Could Kody recover his balance, or was the silent strategy worked over decades now irreversible? Every look, every movement, every communication counted, and sources indicate that the next few days would show just how far the scales had tipped. By nightfall, the tension had not eased. Friends described the atmosphere as taut, nearly electric. Kody reportedly tried to mask his emotions, attempting casual conversation that came across as forced, while Mary's calm movements suggested someone fully aware of the ripple effects she had created. Every interaction carried layers of meaning. Every subtle smile, sigh, or pause was now a part of the story being written behind the closed doors of Flagstaff. And just when the day appeared to come full circle, sources suggest there was one last surprise in the works. Something low-key, subtle but potentially ruinous in its effect. It was a reminder that with this family, the greatest maneuvers are often made with stealth, outside the glare of cameras, witnessed only by those who know where to find it. Morning dawned over Flagstaff with an almost quiet serenity. Sunlight filtered through the windows, birds singing outside, and the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the houses. But insiders reveal that behind this tranquil surface, a tempest was building quietly. Kody Brown, the sources say, was already on edge, pacing and scrolling his phone over and over again, as if expecting the numbers and messages to somehow rearrange themselves. Each look at the screen appeared to intensify the pressure he was under, a pressure that had been quietly building over days. Meri, on the other hand, navigated her morning with meticulous planning, documents neatly piled, cup of coffee in hand. She studied her notes in a silent attentiveness that friends say is almost hypnotic. This was not habit, it was plotting. Each calculation, each detail, each neatly indexed note had been scripted months and even years in advance. An insider's hint that she enjoyed the knowledge that the day's building pandemonium was to a great extent of her creation. And that serene, unflappable demeanor, sources say, only served to heighten Kody's agitation. By mid-morning, subtle changes started to emerge in interactions across the family. Kody attempted to be in control, trying to make appointments on the phone and through text to sort out details. But each effort seemed to blur, rather than clarify things. Friends gossiped that it was like seeing a man attempting to grasp water with his naked hands. The more he struggled, the more it evaded him. Meanwhile, Mary's quiet authority was becoming increasingly apparent. Her subtle gestures, sipping coffee, adjusting papers, nodding thoughtfully at a message, exuded a calm control that made everyone else's stress seem chaotic by comparison. Insiders note that she didn't need drama or confrontation to assert her influence. Instead, her strength lay in preparation, in patience, and in executing every step with precision. It's remarkable, insiders say, how silence can command more power than shouting. Kody's frantic energy filled every room, but Meri's quiet, calculated moves resonated far deeper. By afternoon, tensions mounted further. A small misunderstanding, one that under other conditions would have been resolved immediately, became a prism for unstated power plays. Kody allegedly tried to explain, but his clarifications only brought up gaps, previously quietly pointed out and stored by Meri. Friends whisper that the moment felt like sitting to watch a game of chess in which one player realizes with a start that the other has planned out every potential move. Then, the twist insiders call almost calamitous for Kody came. A strategically timed message unveiled a small but significant detail from months back, something he had forgotten, something Meri had kept secret. Sources say the impact was instantaneous. His calm broke, frustration replaced it, and for the first time he seemed unsure how to react. Meri, however, is said to have responded with a quiet, almost otherworldly calm. A faint smile, a gentle nod, a silent understanding, small movements that were fraught with huge significance. Close friends of hers suggest that at this time, the tension between her measured precision and Kody's explosive energy was palpable in the air, as if the tension itself had weight and form. Could Kody take back the reins? Insiders wonder, or was this subtle calculating move now entirely tilting the balance? Every sentence, every look, every hesitation counted, and those observing could sense the tension building with the minutes ticking by. As the day continued, the family dynamic grew increasingly complex. Minor interactions, passing a plate, a casual comment, or even an exchanged glance, were charged with meaning. Friends described the atmosphere as taut with anticipation, almost cinematic, as if each moment could erupt into conflict at any second. And yet, despite the undercurrent of tension, Meri's composed movements remained deliberate, a quiet anchor amidst the storm. By nightfall, the drama had hit new levels. Kody had tried to catch his footing, attempting to handle conversations and interactions that he used to control easily. But insiders say with every try, what was laid bare was how meticulously Meri had planned for every scenario. Even the other wives found themselves stuck in the fine art of creating a balance of watching and quietly positioning, some quietly envying her exactness, others jostling anxiously to see the reactions play out. And then the ultimate quiet reveal. A small piece of information, seemingly minor, surfaced late in the evening. Insiders claim this detail could shift the balance even further, leaving Kody scrambling while Meri's calm authority remained unchallenged. The question now was whether he could recover, or if the quiet, relentless precision had already won. By nightfall, the atmosphere in Flagstaff was electric with tension. Friends say the homes were filled with unspoken challenges, subtle victories, and carefully executed moves that only those paying close attention could fully understand. Kody's reactive energy clashed with Meri's deliberate calm, creating a storm of emotion that was invisible to outsiders, but impossible to ignore for those within the circle. The next day in Flagstaff held a near-deceptive stillness. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, birds trilled, and the scent of coffee wafted idly from room to room. But behind the scenes, insiders insist, tension seethed like live wire. Kody Brown, according to sources, was wound up tight already, obsessively checking messages, pacing back and forth, and muttering to himself. The load of past days, the figures, the papers, the small but insistent nudges of forethought, pressed upon him like a tempest he could not foretell or master. Meri, on the other hand, navigated the morning with intention and calm. Each note read through, each email scrutinized, each document double-checked, the silent ritual that had become second nature. Friends who know her say it wasn't preparation. It was timing, patience, and making the last moves with calculation. Each step she made was calculated, controlled, and precisely placed to get the result that she had hoped for all along. And that serenity, insiders insist, was pushing Kody further and further toward a breaking point with each ticking hour. By mid-morning, tacit exchanges became weighty with meaning. Kody's efforts to reassert himself, texts, phone calls, delicate conversations appeared to unravel before they were even complete. Friends speak in hushed tones of the desperation that his energy conveyed. He was attempting to respond, but each move was predicted, each action countered. Meanwhile, Meri's quiet authority was ever present. Her calm demeanor, small gestures, and controlled tone carried more weight than any loud confrontation ever could. Insiders describe moments where even the smallest action, a sip of coffee, a thoughtful pause, a quiet glance, shifted the emotional tide, leaving Kody visibly unsettled. By midday, the tension mounted to a breaking point. A previously unmentioned detail, a solitary document painstakingly saved, emerged, and insiders say it hit Kody like a tidal wave. Friends whisper that for the first time he fully grasped the extent of preparation he faced. The peace established by routine and authority was steadily and unmistakably shifting in favor of the others. It's remarkable, insiders say, how the quietest person can wield the greatest power. Kody's frantic energy was visible in every room, but Meri's calm precision resonated far deeper, shaping the day's events almost invisibly. By nightfall, the cracks in Kody's facade were irreparable. Efforts at choreographing control were countered by stealthy, deliberate moves, and the other three wives, Christine, Janelle, and Robyn, observed as the silent game of chess was played out. Witnesses recall the contrast as cinematic, one person desperately reacting, the other deliberately playing out each move towards a climactic edge. And then came the final subtle twist. A revelation so quietly delivered that it left even Kody momentarily speechless. Insiders whisper that it wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried consequences that could no longer be ignored. Meri's preparation had reached its peak. The storm had fully formed and the balance of power was clear. Could Kody take back over? Or had the years of careful plotting and patient silence at last won Meri the victory? The verdict now rested suspended in the air, weighty and immovable. By evening the air in Flagstaff was heavy with resolve and introspection. Kody, weary and introspective, understood that some wars are fought not with raucous rhetoric, but with quiet precision and inflexible patience. Meri, poised and calm, had carried out each maneuver with a level of skill that felt magical to insiders. Even the other wives seemed to sense the subtle pivot that had occurred, the tacit reality that preparation and timing can trump reaction and authority. As the house fell into quiet, one thing was sure: sometimes the greatest triumphs occur silently, with precision, patience, and foresight. Ultimately, insiders claim, the lesson was unmistakable. Kody had dealt with an obstacle he hadn't seen coming, one constructed on scrupulous planning, subtle authority, and years of watchful observation. Meri had been unruffled, unflappable, and thoughtful, making what could have been a casual message or minor detail into an avalanche of strategic benefits. And as the family sat back and thought about it, quietly and in private, the story ended not in drama or conflict, but with a certain sense of undeniable knowledge. Preparation and calm can beat panic and reaction every time.